For this question, we're going to be analyzing the lovely trig function f of t here. And for the first part of the question, we are being asked to find the period of it. So hopefully you should remember that there is a formula to help us find the period, and it is 2 pi over b, where b represents our coefficient in front of the t here, which is 0.8 pi. That number right there. So working this out, we're going to get 2 pi over our b value of 0.8 pi. So our pi's will cancel out, and if we calculate 2 divided by 0.8, we get 2.5. So that's our period. Now for the next part of the question, it's asking us to interpret what the period represents in this context. Well, this question is talking about a scenario where someone is riding their bike and a nail gets caught in the tire. So when time is at 0, you can imagine that the nail is at the bottom of the tire. That's where it's contacting the tire. And then the period would represent how many time it takes for that nail to go back to where it started. So one full rotation. So in a quick sentence there, I just explained that it takes 2.5 seconds for the nail and the wheel to complete one full rotation. Now for the next part of the question, we're being asked to graph at least one cycle of the function that includes the y-intercept. Now the y-intercept is probably the easiest part of graphing it because it's at 0, 0. When time is 0, the nail is on the ground. But another little hint we can do to help us is taking a look at the function. Our d value, the vertical displacement or midline, is at positive 13. So we know that's our midline is going to be along the line y equals 13. And we also notice our a value is negative 13. But to help us find the amplitude, we would take the absolute value of that, which would be positive 13. So why is that helpful? Well, if you take the midline and add the amplitude, you get your maximum value. And if you take the amplitude the midline and subtract the amplitude, you get your minimum value. So going from 13 plus 13, we know our maximum is going to be at 26, and our minimum would be at 13 minus 13, which is 0. So the next step you want to do is grab your graphing calculator and type the entire function in and graph it. You are going to have to fiddle around with the window settings a little bit, but you should get something that looks a little like this. I found that using the x scale number of 0.25 really helped. And the reason being, when we take a look at the table values, you'll notice that when we change the settings, the range for the x values to 0.25, conveniently we get our minimum and our maximum. You can see our minimum there is 0, 0, and our maximum, which occurs at one point, an x value of 1.25 and the y value of 26. So this is really going to help us out here to graph. So let's go ahead and zoom in and get started by labeling our x and y axes. So you'll notice for the y-axis, I did intervals of 2, and that just made sense because you can see I ended up with 30, and I know that the maximum is 26. And then for the x-axis, I did intervals where each line represented 1/4, or 0.25. And again, if you remember looking at those table values, that's going to make it really convenient to plot the points. So let's go ahead and get started. We know we're starting at the point 0, 0. And then at 0.25, we have a y value of 2.48, so that's about 2.5, right around there. And then you're just going to keep going along, so 0.5 is around 9. And then using those table values, we'll just go ahead and finish all of those points. And you'll notice that when I reach an x value of 2.5, we've returned back to a y value of 0. And so that's one full cycle, and we can stop there because that's all that the question was asking us to do. So we can go ahead and connect these dots together, these points. It's going to look something like this. All right, moving on to the final part of the question. Does the height of the nail ever reach 30 inches above the ground, and justify your answer? Well, we've already talked about this. We figured out that the maximum was at 26 inches. You can also tell that's the case because, well, we graphed it. So that's about it for this question. Thanks for visiting JD's preparation.